Characters. Who are they? What are they? Who will they become? So much goes into the creation of a character. Their backstory, culture, origins, abilities, personality, description, and so much more. As a reader, we only get a glimpse of what truly goes into the development of each character. So sit back and relax as we explore characters in depth on this week's episode of Character Driven with Madilyn Dale. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another amazing episode of Character Driven. I've got another fantastic author for you guys to meet, and we are going to be chatting with him about one of his exciting characters. Let me just say, I have read his book, and he has so many great characters in this story. But the one we're talking about, he is actually my top fave. So let me bring him in and let him introduce himself. So Daniel, go ahead and tell our viewers who you are, about your book, and your character.
Well, my name is Dan Myers, obviously, and my book is Alejandro Rising, and it is a book about a young man who is trying to become knighted so he can marry his true love. You know, very common trope, I know. But I hope that the way I did it and the way I presented it is entertaining to people. And one of the characters in the book, I didn't want to do the main character, but one of my favorite characters and one of the other characters is a knight named Braxlo, Braxlo the Brave. And this is a knight who was in Dragonsbane, which is like the preeminent knighthood in the world. They have their own freehold. They carved it out between the human and the elf kingdoms. They are, as far as knights go, just super disciplined and super strict, and they're very proud of, their reputation. And they're also the oldest order of knights in the world. So he comes from that line, and he began as an urchin, just an orphan. He was went through the guard, became a knight. He lived as a knight, did his 25 years. Then he left. He had gotten married, had kids, had a farm. Then his wife died, and he went for a while to just kind of join his wife in death. And so he volunteered for these basically suicide missions, and eventually realized that he still had purpose in life. And then he saw Fairwind, who was an elf princess, and he swore fealty to her and has been her protector ever since.
Which he does a fantastic job as her protector. That was like the bond between them, him as her protector and everything. I loved that in reading this story. So let's talk about his backstory, the trauma he went through with losing his wife, and why he decided to go on all of these missions. What made him change his mind when he saw the princess?
Well, the reading I'll give is not from the book, but it is his backstory. And it was during one of these missions where he fully expected it to be his last. But one of the townspeople had come up, and he just saw the relief and gratefulness on that person's face. And he realized that, he still had good to do. It wasn't necessarily just about him and his loss, and that he was preventing other people from having that loss. Mm. And so that is kind of where he decided that he would try to live again.
That's a good reason to live, and I like that he found that in that. So his discipline and everything going forward, being her protector. Let's talk about their interaction. because I felt like he was more like brotherly towards her than anything. Let's go ahead and describe that relationship for our viewers, because I know I read the book, but some of them may not have. So, which I highly recommend you guys read this book.
So he he saw her. She's incredibly beautiful. She's an elf. She's a young-ish elf. Uh, I think she's like 150 in the book, which they live till like 90. So she's effectively in her 20s and just kind of at the height of her beauty and charm. And he saw her and just felt a connection and went and swore fealty. And as I said, the Knights of Dragonbane, they're very disciplined. They take their oaths very seriously. It's just drilled into them at such a young age. And so he, when he is with her, he is always thinking about, protecting her and defending her. And she actually has that effect on people, as I allude to in the second book, and sometime in the third book I'll expand on that even more. Anyway, but so yeah, it's I mean, I'd say it's almost fatherly, even more than brotherly or big brotherly would
Yeah.
be. That's kind of exactly what I was going for. Is he obviously he loves her, but he's not like doesn't want to have a relationship. I don't know how family friendly this has to be, but
It's
so
okay, because this is like
yeah,
you can cuss and
he
everything, and
doesn't
like
want to have a relationship with her, but he wants to serve her, and that's giving him purpose in his life now.
nice.
And then through her, he meets the rest of the party,
Yeah.
and her friends, if you will. So yeah.
So let's talk about how he interacts with the party of people, because that's always, I found that very entertaining when they all got together. Tell our viewers a little bit about that and a little bit about the mashup of friends in this group he interacts with.
Sure. So they kind of met, you know, friends of friends of friends, right? So the three main characters are Marion and Alejandre and Sivli, and they all grew up in the Southern Kingdom. Marion is the princess of the Southern Kingdom, which was overthrown by the Golden Elf, and so those three are kind of the core of the group, if you will. Marion obviously does not adventure with the rest of them, but Sibley had met Eric, who was another cleric or priest rather of the forest spirits, and Eric had a friend Robin. Eric also and Robin is a mage, if you will, and the magic in the world is a little different. So they all are based on the same magic and the same spirits. It's how they use the spirits that determine whether and which spirits they focus on, which determine what powers or skills they have. Anyway, so then Braxlo had met Fairwind, obviously. Fairwind had known Lolark, and Lolark, who is a paladin, let's see, do I have everybody in the group? I think I do. But so Lolark and Fairwind and Braxlo had kind of started getting together. And then Lolark knew Eric as well. And so they started, and then eventually Sibley's joined. And so they just started adventuring together, and, traveling together. And that's how the party interacts. So you have special kind of friendships. So Braxlo actually kind of likes Eric. Nobody really likes Robin a lot. I shouldn't say that. But I mean,
They're
he
your
is.
characters. You can absolutely say whatever you want. If that's how they interact, like, you got to be honest. Like, that's what you made them to be
Yeah,
like.
because Robin is kind of for himself.
Mhm.
But he doesn't act against the party necessarily, but he'll definitely do things on the side to help himself. The rest of the party is pretty much supports the party. The interaction that the big character arc for Braxlo is one which doesn't take place in this book, but spoiler alert, Fairwind gets married and no
Oh,
longer needs his services. So in the third book, they separate. Uh, so
yes.
it's coming
Okay.
to terms with
I'm with
that.
you now.
But in this book, the big character arc is just the fact that Braxlo, who was this great, renowned knight, is at kind of the end of his years. I mean, he's approaching 60, he's lived a life, and Alejandre is, this young buck and super good. And so Alejandre is on the rise and Braxel is on the decline. And that creates some resentment between the two. And it's not, it's more just snide comments and, you know, belittling. It's not, he's not attacking him or anything, but just that realization and understanding why he has this resentment.
Mm-hmm.
And so throughout the book, he, kind of changes his attitude towards Alejandro.
Nice. His character, I really like all of your characters. Let's just be real here. So, Braxlo and his family. Let's talk about that dynamic. How did that change his character? Did it encourage him to become what he was when he finally worked through all the trauma? Did he fall back on who he originally was?
So he's kind of estranged from his sons. He has two sons. And he's kind of estranged from them because, when they were growing up, he was a knight and he wasn't really around. And so, they kind of went off, didn't really know him. And then, especially when his wife died, uh, he just picked up, sent a note to his son saying the farm is yours and left. So it really was his wife that was, holding him to his life and to the world and their relationship.
So in all, he basically became a brand new character then, kind of. Well, not a character, but he gained a different personality than from who he originally was beforehand.
Quite a bit, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
because it
just
seems,
he just became. He kind of went on. He had a death wish.
yeah,
Uh, he wanted to join his wife, join his spirit, join her spirit, and um, like I said, it wasn't until afterwards, and that's just because that was his whole life.
yeah,
That's they were together, and for 10 years, that's was their dynamic.
yeah. Will he ever, like, moving forward, reconcile like the relationship between him and his sons?
Um,
I know that's kind of spoiler thing, but that with it being such a big like I family's always an important thing to me, and like it hurts my heart to know that he's like estranged from him, and yeah, and I mean I know he's still working like as a knight and he's involved with the group and everything, but I that's just curiosity, I guess.
yeah, no. There is a scene where I don't want to say they reconcile, but I think they at least just gain an appreciation for you know why he was gone all the time and the life he lived
Yeah.
because they still live up in the freehold of Dragonsbane.
Oh.
And not a lot of the books take place in the freehold of Dragonsbane.
Yeah.
But that is where the group meets. They usually meet once a year and just get together and you know hang out, and sometimes they get quests or adventures that they like to go on, but most of the time they just hang out at Dragonsbane. So it's during one of those that he runs into one of his sons, and they have a little bit of a discussion.
Hmm. Do they get physical when they talk? Like beat each other up kind of thing? Or is it just they talk?
They just talk, and there might be some alcohol involved, so it might be, some
Liquid courage.
yeah,
Which that was
some
funny. I because you tied in a lot of like the mead and the wine or morning beer. I think that was the one that really spiked my curiosity because I was like, I every time I would read it, I'd be like, I wonder what that tastes like. Like, what does it taste like? Is what's my thought. Because you made it seem like it would taste actually really good, even though it was a flat beer. Like just sprinkling certain seasonings on top. So I won't go down that rabbit hole. That was a curious thing I noticed. So
yeah, it's basically like mulled beer. I mean, it's beer, it has sugar added and some other spices, just because it's flat and a little stale.
yeah. So it makes it taste good. But so okay, that would be right up my alley then. I know that was like, I don't know why that was like one of the weirdest things that I could not like stop thinking about while I was reading. But I love that the interactions they all had, like sitting down at the tables, and eating meals together. When you were putting the story together with Braxlo's character, did you visualize those interactions with everybody, or was that something you had to like almost like write out before you plugged in?
No, so I visualized a lot of it. I I really actually intended this book, and these book to be more about their interactions, and
Mhm.
kind of the story took place. But really wanted to focus on their interactions and the dynamics between them, and just when people get together, how they give each other a hard time, how they um, treat each other, and how their personalities change depending on who they're with.
Huh.
Um, so I tried to get as much of that as I could into the stories and into the characters. And Braxlo was a great chance to do that because he's treats Alejandre one way. Of course, he treats Fairwind completely different.
Mhm.
He treats Lolark different because he has a lot of respect for Lolark, as a paladin and as a leader of the Palladium Council, and so I I just wanted to try to get some of that where the characters aren't always consistent in their actions depending on who they're conversing with or interacting with.
Hmm. Would you say Braxlo has a favorite character outside of Fairwind? Like another person he preferred to interact with over the others?
Yeah, I so him and Lolark are kind of the two. Um, they're close, if you will.
Mhm.
Uh, Again, just because they kind of had the same upbringing and they understand each other, and um, so that is kind of his closest ally outside of Fairwind. And then outside of that, like I said, Robin is he's a mage, but he's also a member of the Thieves Guild.
Mhm.
Eric is also a member of the Thieves Guild, which the two of them met through. So he's kind of not necessarily distant from them, but he's always kind of leery in the back of his mind because he realizes that they're members of the Thieves Guild. And the Thieves Guild in my world is not like this evil, nefarious group. It's basically the spy network for each kingdom, each city. The Thieves Guild in the city or in the kingdom works for the king, and the king has a lot of control. But they also handle the orphanages. So any children that are left uh, parentless or whose parents can't afford them, they send them to the orphanages. You know, the Thieves Guild sends them out to beg and make sure they get their coin.
Mhm.
Um, but it also feeds them, clothes them, um, and then most of those end up going to a trade or a the military or to a palace, which I won't get into here.
I really actually liked that you did that with the Thieves Guild because it wasn't like because like you said, it's not the same as what a lot of people think originally with those kind of things. It's better. So, and yeah. So,
Not to say they don't do nefarious things, but
yeah.
that's they have a valid function in society and role that they perform.
Yeah. With Braxlo's character, did you have something that you found to be your favorite about him?
Um, I I don't know. I liked his sense of humor because it's a lot of my sense of humor. All their senses of humor, a lot of my sense of humor.
Mhm.
Um, so that's kind of one of the things. I also just like I tried to make him that he's really an excellent fighter and swordsman, but he doesn't he's not braggadocious at all.
Mhm.
He just kind of goes and he's very workmanlike in that he's a great fighter. He knows he's a great fighter. He's um, accomplished a lot and he's done a lot, and he just doesn't feel like he needs to brag about it.
Hmm.
So that's kind of one of the character traits that I tried to instill in him.
Nice. And his training way back when he was younger, I'm taking us back in time a little bit. What was his biggest struggle in becoming a knight?
Well, he was born an orphan,
Mhm.
or that's not right. He wasn't born an orphan, but he became an orphan and was raised by the Thieves Guild, which might have something to do with things he doesn't like. But then he became a member of the guard, and eventually uh, was recognized by the knights and taken as a squire. And so, I mean, he's had to work really hard for everything he's got. He
Mhm.
he wasn't born of nobility and squired to a knight that everything was paid for, and like Alejandro. I mean, Alejandro was sponsored to
Yeah.
go to the Knights of Dragonbane. So he went with a horse and armor and all that stuff and had the best of everything while he was there. Whereas Braxlo just he didn't. He had to earn everything that he got, and he did it through hard work and discipline. And he's very, like I said, he very much adheres to those ideals and what the Knights of Dragonsbane instilled in him.
I can definitely see that sparking some confrontation between those two, like you mentioned, differences. And let's talk about how he met his wife. What is the story there? I know that may be in the backstory that you're talking about, like doing a sample of, but how did they meet?
It is actually mentioned in the book a little bit, I think. Um, but she was a princess in a palace, and they had met that way and became his favorite. And eventually, they just decided that she would leave the palace and marry him and become his wife.
Hmm.
And so the that's how they met. It's not necessarily the most romantic story ever told, but
Well,
it is what it is.
in a way, it is. She left all that she could have had as a princess to go and have a life with him.
But
How did he feel about her
by
turning all of that
princess,
down?
by princess, it's not royal princess. I, so, I'm sorry. What was your question?
How did he feel about her, like, turning that life away to come live with him? Did they fight any about that, or
Well, so for him as a knight, that was kind of a, I want to say step down, but
Mhm,
he's noble and she wasn't. And she was in a profession that's not looked down on, but it's not, the most highfalutin for a lady to be involved in.
mhm.
And so, they had conversations about it. I'm sure don't go into that, but yeah, the biggest thing was just the conflict for him of what everybody would think about him and her, and the rumor mill and all that go.
Yeah.
And he just didn't care, and he's like, I love you, you love me, let's get married.
Nice. And I
So
like
they
that
did.
he just ignored all of that because a lot of people, they do really care about how that looks, and especially during that kind of time period that the story's written in. So that's a lot of what the mindset is, so to speak. Because I
Hmm.
know there's a portion, can't remember which part of the book, where they talk about the certain colors of things, how they represent certain, like, not so much statuses, but like, maybe it is status is the right
So
word.
it's the knight errant. When you leave knighthood, um, generally you take a color, depending on what kind of job you've taken.
Mhm,
So if you're working for still the king and queen in some capacity, then you'll generally wear blue,
okay.
and not necessarily be all blue, but you'll, like, maybe your shield will be trimmed in blue to
Mhm,
demonstrate that you're a knight errant and that now you're serving the nobility. If you go to become a farmer, you might switch to green. If you're just out for yourself, um, mercenary, or worse, then you generally wear black. So it just depends on what you're what role you're providing. So he chose the black, after he went back into it because he
mm,
was becoming a mercenary, for lack of a better term.
yes. So how did that affect his personality? Like, the changes like that? I know
Um,
I'm asking, like, deep thought questions. So
yeah, so I mean that's right after his wife died, so his personality had kind of already changed, and he decided that he would just take on the black, and look for dangerous assignments, and work through the kingdoms and the guilds, and wherever he had a chance to fight, against tremendous odds, he would go do it just because he wanted to die. But
no.
suicide isn't in his thoughts, so it's like suicide by putting yourself in an unwinnable situation.
Yeah. So that would be frowned upon too as a knight, right? Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking. And I like, okay, so the black also could represent too, like, his inner feelings, how he just wants to be.
The depression and
Yeah.
pain and angst and anger,
Hmm.
that he was feeling. And as the Knight of Dragonsbane too, they're not real emotional, gushy, talk talk it out type of people. So, yeah, he would. That would definitely be kind of his rationale for going that way.
Yeah. Internalize it and keep it. Gosh. All right, Daniel, go ahead and tell our viewers where they can find you and your work.
Well, you can go to www.wyvernsaerie, WYVERNSAERIE.com. There you can order copies of the hardcover, and the paperback is going to be available soon. And you can go find me on Amazon, where you can buy the hardcover, the paperback, and the ebook. And I
Thank
just
you.
dropped the price of the ebook. So if you like ebooks, hopefully, people enjoy the book. I really enjoyed writing it. I've enjoyed the editing process. I've enjoyed the marketing, talking to people like you, and doing these types of interviews, and just having a lot of fun with it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being on Character Driven.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. Braxlo reflected back again to how he got there. After serving his time with Dragonsbane, he had returned to farming until his wife had died late last year. He had heard about the war and decided to hire on as a mercenary. Not for the excitement, he had lived a full life. Now he only wanted to join his wife Vanessa's spirit in the Aether. Assigned with his fellow Knights of Dragonbane, it felt like old times.